advised, this is a free speech zone.
Welcome back, everybody, for another Be Advised podcast. I'm Robbie, and this is Ron, and today we have a special guest. Ron, I'll let you introduce him here.
Hey, everybody. So, Randy Brown is a friend of mine. I've known him for, about 14 years, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Randy Brown is... He has his own YouTube channel. Go ahead and plug that real quick.
I've actually got two YouTube channels. The first one is called Cameo Man, and then the one after that is called Vlogging with Mr. Brown.
Okay. And he is the author of 2 books, and for about, I'd say, almost a decade or so, you've studied NLP, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Is that correct?
Right.
And every time that you give me a lot of knowledge on this, and I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And every time that I try to explain NLP to someone, I get in this weird area where I don't really know how to explain it because it's so vast. And so I think you would be able to help us out with that. So what is your definition from your studies of neuro-linguistic programming?
Well, it's kind of a hard question to answer. It's no surprise to me that you get in a little bind because you can't just go in the dictionary and read like what is NLP. So basically, to sum it up in like 1 or 2 sentences, I would have to say that it's modeling successful behavior. And in NLP, what's known as modeling, isn't like a fashion photographer like, oh, I'm going to take a pose. Modeling is finding somebody who does something really well and then figuring out how they do that so you can replicate those beliefs for yourself.
Okay. I think everybody can kind of identify with that. Maybe know somebody in their life that you just described. So this is it's a natural phenomenon that's people just do since the beginning of time. But at some point, someone said, "Hey, lashed all of these things together and gave it a name, and then began to give terms to the different applications of NLP." So give us an idea of where that all started, who started it, and was a very successful guy, actually, right?
Oh yeah. The creators of NLP are 2 guys named Richard Bandler and John Grinder. I don't know too much about John Grinder because he hasn't really, persisted in the field that much. But in the beginning, it was the 1970s in California, and this mathematician, Richard Bandler, he had a roommate with a lot of psychology books, and he had a lot of free time, so he was bored. So he decided to start pulling off those psychology books, and he loved what he read. He poured through them. And eventually he came to notice that a lot of psychologists are like arguing, okay, which is better, cognitive behavioral or Gestalt or this type or that type. He realized that a lot of people could tell you why a person was sick, but they couldn't tell you how to get them better. Psychology hasn't really advanced that much as far as normal psychology, the common example is, to just ignore the person and just give them a drug to make them docile. Richard Bandler has totally eschewed that method. And normal doctors and psychologists, they study the people who are sick and how they got that way. Richard Bandler and John Grinder took a totally new approach by studying the people who got well and decided to figure out how they got well and their own opinions on the person who got well's opinion on how he did it. And he figured out that, like, the mind is made up of pictures, images, and sensations and feelings. And Richard Bandler and John Grinder eventually found a way to manipulate those images just by a creative visualization, And one of the things that Richard talks about a lot was the angel in the closet metaphor. Remember, I was talking about this with you before, Ron?
Fascinating story. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, what happened with the angel in the closet story is, Richard had been working in psychology for a while, and this family came to Richard with a 6 or 7-year-old girl, and they said, "Look, Dr. Bandler, we've tried everything. We're going to send this girl through years of therapy. We're gonna dose her up with medication so she talks right." And Richard's like, "Well, what's wrong with her?" And they go, "Well, I mean, she keeps talking about this angel in the closet. She keeps saying there's an angel in the closet, and when she pulls a string, the angel says, 'I love you.'" And keep in mind, the family was going to send this child to years of therapy. They were going to dose her up with tons of medication, but Richard Bandler did something counterintuitive. He said, "You know what? I'm going to come over, and I want to see the closet." So they take Richard Bandler, they take him to the house, and he goes to the little girl, show me where that angel is. So they go into the room, right? They go into the little girl's room, they open up the closet, and there is one of those little rag dolls with a little pull string. And every time you pull the string, it says, "I love you." Now, the takeaway from this is they were going to give this kid years of therapy. They were going to dose her up on a ton of meds. But Richard Bandler took a different approach, and he discovered that, hey, you know what? This kid isn't crazy. You just need to listen to people.
Okay. It kind of reminds me, I know I don't want to derail the conversation, but I think we've talked before about the thud experiment. So you're not a big fan of traditional psychology, I take it, because you think that maybe they are not looking in the right place, that type of thing?
I am not into traditional psychology as much, for the simple fact of, common psychology today is, you know what, let's just throw a drug at it. Oh, you're sick, you're ill, let's just throw a drug at you, so the problem's not fixed, but you're more docile and controllable. You just don't care. That's all the drugs do to you. And you and I, Ron, we've made several commercials on this. We've got the Lividad commercial and that other one that I did with the pills. You remember that?
Yeah.
And a lot of these drugs not only just make you don't care about anything, a lot of these drugs have several side effects, and a lot of these drugs, the side effect is death.
Right. So going back real quick for people that don't know, if you've ever heard of the thud experiment, I guess it was like the 70s or the 80s. A guy, and I forget his name, you can just look this up, sent out, I think it was a dozen different people that he knew across the country, and all he did was instruct them to go to their nearest psychiatric hospital, and they were to just tell the people there that they heard the word thud in their head. Nothing else. Everything else was to be, don't lie about anything, act normal, act the way you are, but you hear the word thud. All of them were committed with schizophrenia. And no matter what they said, no matter how much they protested, no matter how much they said, "No, this is an experiment, you don't know about it," the psychiatric hospitals would say, "No, this is a delusion, you're schizophrenic," and they had to go on medication, as you said, and pretend to get better, to get out of the hospital. And I think that's very telling because they didn't know exactly what they were doing. They didn't check with each other to see if this is a phenomenon. They just threw drugs at it, as you said. So yeah, it's probably not, old psychology is probably not the best model to use to help people better themselves. So, studying NLP, can you tell us some things that you've discovered that might help people? What are they called? What are the terms? Just help the viewers understand this phenomenon.
It's kind of a little bit tricky to define because the thing about NLP is, like psychology, it encompasses a whole plethora of different methodologies and stuff like that. One thing is just language patterns in general. You know what Mad Libs are, right? Those little fill in the blank sentences.
Those were those were awesome in the '80s when I was a kid.
Oh yeah. They were cool. And one of the things that that's cool about NLP is a lot of people are nervous because they don't know what to say to people or friends or relationship partners. But NLP actually gives you like little scripts to go by, which is fun because a lot of people aren't naturals talking to people in general, or to women or to men if you're a girl. But the thing is that if you look at advertising, especially like advertising today, you'll notice that some of the words in the advertising, they're highlighted, some are bolded, some are italicized, some are underlined. And the thing about that is, this is what's known in conversational hypnosis as embedded commands. Now, an embedded command is basically a short, it could be whatever length you want, but it's usually typically from 2 to 5 words long.
Like, hold on one second.
Something is not.
I don't want to miss a word. So your Skype kind of broke up right there. When you said embedded commands and you said a short, it froze up. So say that again so that people.
Okay, well, embedded commands are a way to point something out and load people with instructions subconsciously. Basically, an embedded command is something as simple as, like a short 2 to 5 word phrase. In this instance, we'll use the phrase brush your teeth. Okay? Now, in an ad, if they wanted you to brush your teeth, they would say, hey, everybody's talking about how everybody likes to brush their teeth. And many dentists show that we need to brush our teeth several times during the day. So, what they would do with the word brush your teeth is they would highlight that, they would underline it, or, and this is what's known as an analog marker. It's what sets off the embedded command from the rest of the sentence. And if you look at any ad, virtually any ad, you will see embedded commands up the wazoo. You will see like, hey, buy this now, in like highlighted, or hey, get this product, or stuff like that. And a lot of people see this, and they have no idea what it is. They have no idea that those little words are going directly into their subconscious. And another part of language pattern is what's known as the weasel phrase. Now, it's kind of a bad term, but what a weasel phrase is, a weasel phrase would be the sentence with the blank. Like, I'll give you 2 examples. You can blank, or can you blank. Now, using the embedded command that we just came up with, brush your teeth, they would just insert the embedded command with the weasel phrase. So brush your teeth would become, you can brush your teeth. or can you brush your teeth quicker than this ad is over? Stuff like that. So that's those are two very basic hypnotic patterns, and a lot of these theories were come up by a very famous hypnotist, Milton H. Erickson. And Virginia Satir was a therapist. Fritz Perls was a Gestalt therapist. And Milton H. Erickson was one of the most famous hypnotherapists of all time. And those three people were basically the triad of like the model that Richard Bandler modeled his therapeutic techniques on.
Okay. So do you want to use that natural segue and go into the hypnotherapy realm?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Milton H. Erickson, he grew up at a young age. He had polio, so he was paralyzed most of his life. So he had to, communicate to people what he wanted, and he had to communicate in such a way in order to get people to do what he wanted. And he studied hypnotherapy, and one of the things he was famous for was telling very long stories with embedded commands hidden in them. And a client would come to Milton. Milton would begin. He would just start telling a story, and then suddenly he would add things like, "Oh, brush your teeth. Oh, set some goals. Oh, let's see what the future holds." And then at the end of the therapy session, he'd go, "Okay, we're done." And like the client was like puzzled. He was like, "What just happened? You didn't do anything." And then a week later, the person would come back, not totally cured, but much better. And they'd be like, "Hey, I don't know what you did, doc, but it was amazing." And what Milton H. Erickson was doing is he was telling stories with embedded commands, with things like, get better, seek treatment, stuff like that. And then, go ahead. Fritz Perls was a famous Gestalt psychologist.
Now, explain for those that don't, because I've heard that term before, but I don't even really know what that means. Explain Gestalt psychologist.
I would be pressed to define Gestalt psychology, but I know that Fritz Perls did it. You can go on YouTube and you can watch several of his videos. Basically, a lot of the questioning tactics and the therapy tactics that Richard Bandler and John Grinder founded upon was his models of therapy. And then I'm not really sure what Gestalt psychology is, but
okay.
I know that it's used in NLP.
That's just okay.
And Virginia Satir was also another psychologist that Richard and John studied. And Richard noticed that a lot of the people in Virginia Satir's field, when she was doing therapy, she got change rather quickly. And all of her colleagues, besides Richard and John, thought, "Wow, she's just naturally good. She's just a natural. She does it, and she's got a talent that nobody can have." And Richard was like, "You know what? No, wait a second. I think Milton H. Erickson and Fritz Perls and Virginia Satir, I don't think they were just lucky. I don't think they just were really good. I think there are several tactics and techniques and applications of what they do. And if we can just find out the secret formula to what they do, we can replicate it." And for Milton H. Erickson, some of it was, hypnotic patterns. From Virginia Satir and Fritz Perls, it was therapeutic techniques. But one of the things that I think a lot of interviewers, every newscaster should know this, is the METAL model, which is a series of questions designed to bring out information that is either deleted, distorted, or generalized. And those are the three perceptual filters, but I don't want to go off on a tangent here.
No, well, say that again real quick. Say that again real quick. What you just said.
Richard Bandler discovered that there are 3 perceptual filters that a normal human goes through. It's distortion, and an example of distortion is, have you ever, been talking to a guy, Ron, and he talks about this woman he just met, and he's like, "Oh man, this girl's so hot. She's like a 10 on a scale of 5. Oh man, she's great and she's awesome." And then you go and meet the girl, and she's like a 6 or a 7 at best. So what this guy had in his mind is, because she liked him, he distorted, the facts. He distorted reality. And then deletion is all of our brains delete things, because the human mind registers 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information at a time. That's why phone numbers are only 7 digits long for a reason, because that's all we can hold in our mind at a time. Now, if I were to not filter out absolutely everything in this room, you would go insane. Like, I could talk about choline and vitamin D and ginkgo biloba and super B focus and acetyl-L-carnitine and fish oil and the secrets of mental math. Your brain would go insane if you did not delete some of this information. Like, you would have sensory overload. And then finally, generalization. Basically, with generalization, like right over there, what am I pointing to, Ron? What is that?
A door knob.
It's a door with a knob on it. Now, here's the thing, Ron. You've never seen that door before. It's probably a totally different color. The knob has a slightly different shape. But if you weren't able to generalize information and say, okay, all doors are rectangular and they all have knobs on them. If you were not able to generalize that information, every time you ran into a new door, you'd be like, whoa, how do I open this thing? It's weird. I have a door. I know doors are blue and, they're really large. This one's just kind of like medium size, so I don't know what this is. Mm-hmm. So those were the 3 perceptual filters. And, these are things we do to understand our world.
Okay.
Yeah, you kind of experience that every time you go to a new shower and you don't know how to work it, even though it's the same concept. But I always experience that.
How to mix the hot and the cold.
Yeah, some of them you have to mix them. Some you just turn. Some you lift up. Some you lift down. But it's like
right.
Also, I kind of want to interject, on the sensory part, where we could, if we were to see everything, my camera's on set. If we were to see everything, we would go crazy, and I agree. Do you think at some point those sensories were shut off, or we had, so many more senses than we did, and they were shut off at some point, or we just weren't born that way or created that way? Kind of go on a little crazier thought here, but...
It's not really a matter of crazy and not crazy. Crazy is really a relative term, because what some person would consider crazy, another person would consider completely normal. Sure. In some provinces of Nigeria, going like this is a big insult. That's a big insult. And I'm sorry to any Nigerian people I offended by doing that. But
really, I'm curious, why is that an insult? What in their culture, what does this mean?
I don't know. In some cultures, just showing the bottom of your feet can be insulting. The bottom of the feet is the dirtiest part of the body during the day, so showing that can be
left hand handshake type thing.
Yeah. So what was the question again? I forgot.
I don't know. It was just kind of I kind of think at some point our genes were manipulated into blocking out sensors that we could have had. To make us more controllable or whatnot, or maybe they're still doing that nowadays with, secret government contracts or whatever, if you catch my drift.
That takes us a little bit out of the realm of NLP, but it goes down to a theory called neuroplasticity. Are you familiar with that?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, for the viewers, basically neuroplasticity is the theory that your brain, just by thinking, can alter its chemical makeup. Now, the reason this is because, like, if you're thinking, oh, hey, I need to take these pills over here. Oh, hey, I need to work out every day. Oh, hey, I need to eat, I need to eat vegetables, and I need to cut out the meat. Just by thinking those thoughts, those change the processes in your body. And one of the things that NLP can help you do is help you think happier thoughts. And this thinking happier thoughts doesn't just feel good. It's actually good for you physically. Like when you feel good, you release endorphins into your body, you release serotonin, you release dopamine, you release oxytocin, and all of those actually change the chemical makeup of your mind. So if you're going all around negative all the time, you're releasing a hormone called cortisol into your brain. And every time you think a negative thought, or you get depressed, or you get sad, that cortisol releases into your brain and can actually affect your body chemistry. And the beauty of NLP is a lot of NLP teaches you to be happy just for being alive, for no reason at all, just because I'm here and I'm not hungry, I'm not impoverished, I've got a lot of things to be thankful for, got all 10 fingers, all 10 toes. And there's a lot of visualization techniques that will enable you to feel happy for no reason. And like I said, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all that is released in your brain, and those positive chemicals affect your brain and actually make you smarter and a more happier person.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So those were the 3 perceptual filters, and these are things we do to understand our world.
Okay.
You kind of experience that every time you go to a new shower. You don't know how to work it, even though it's the same concept. But I always experience that.
How to mix the hot and the cold.
Yeah, some of them you have to mix them. Some you just turn. Some you lift up. Some you lift down. But it's like
right.
Also, I kind of want to interject on the sensory part where we could if we were to see everything. My cameras aren't set up. If we were to see everything, we would go crazy, and I agree. Do you think at some point those sensories were shut off, or we had, so many more senses than we did, and they were shut off at some point, or we just weren't born that way, or created that way? Kind of go on a little crazier thought here, but...
Well, it's not really a matter of crazy and not crazy. Crazy is really a relative term, because what some person would consider crazy, another person would consider completely normal.
True.
In some provinces of Nigeria, going like this is a big insult. That's a big insult. And I'm sorry to any Nigerian people I offended by doing that.
Really? Why? I'm curious. Why is that an insult? In their culture, what does this mean?
I don't know. In some cultures, just showing the bottom of your feet can be insulting. The bottom of the feet is the dirtiest part of the body during the day, so showing that can be
left hand handshake type thing.
Yeah. So what was the question again? I forgot.
I don't know. It was just kind of I kind of think at some point our genes were manipulated into blocking out sensors that we could have had. To make us more controllable or whatnot, or maybe they're still doing that nowadays with, secret government contracts or whatever, if you catch my drift.
That takes us a little bit out of the realm of NLP, but it goes down to a theory called neuroplasticity. Are you familiar with that?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, for the viewers, basically neuroplasticity is the theory that your brain, just by thinking, can alter its chemical makeup. Now, the reason this is because, if you're thinking, oh, hey, I need to take these pills over here. Oh, hey, I need to work out every day. Oh, hey, I need to eat vegetables, and I need to cut out the meat. just by thinking those thoughts, those change the processes in your body. And one of the things that NLP can help you do is help you think happier thoughts. And this thinking happier thoughts isn't just, doesn't just feel good. It's actually good for you physically. Like when you feel good, you release endorphins into your body, you release serotonin, you release dopamine, you release oxytocin, and all of those actually change the chemical makeup of your mind. So if you're going all around negative all the time, you're releasing a hormone called cortisol into your brain. And every time you think a negative thought, or you get depressed, or you get sad, that cortisol releases into your brain and can actually affect your body chemistry. And the beauty of NLP is a lot of NLP teaches you to be happy just for being alive, for no reason at all, just because I'm here and I'm not hungry, I'm not impoverished, I've got a lot of things to be thankful for, got all 10 fingers, all 10 toes. And there's a lot of visualization techniques that will enable you to feel happy for no reason. And like I said, of course, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all that is released in your brain, and those positive chemicals affect your brain and actually make you smarter and a more happier person.
All right. Real quick, talk about, I don't even know if we've actually talked about this. I think it was one of the videos that maybe you sent me or I saw Richard Bandler do, but it jarred my memory when you just said some of that stuff. Talk about, do you know about, so getting over fears would be one thing that you could use this for. Didn't Richard Bandler have a thing about snakes? There was a guy that was afraid of snakes, and what did he do?
That's kind of a broad topic because one of the main reasons that NLP was created was to tackle the toughest issues that psychologists and therapists face, were basically fears, phobias, and addictions. Now, Richard Bandler has helped a ton of people with fears of snakes, fears of spiders, fears of heights. One of the famous things that he did is he took a person who was afraid of heights onto 2 skyscrapers with a glass bridge in between them, and he literally had the guy walk down the bridge. And there is something called a swish pattern, and if you want to know what the swish pattern is, look in the Anthony Robbins book, Awaken the Giant Within, or Unlimited Power, to those. And right now, I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to suggest, if you want to do some reading into NLP, what I would do is I would get anything with Richard Bandler's name on it,
Okay.
and I would go reverse chronological order. So, get the latest things that Richard Bandler has done, and then go back, because the old stuff has a lot of techniques that are still valid, but there's a lot of more elegant stuff, and elegant is a term that Richard would use, meaning gets a lot more change in a lot less time. So.
Okay. Well, what I was referring to a minute ago is just to cap that is Richard Bandler had a guy that was, the reason why I brought it up is he was afraid of snakes, and he told the guy, I can help you get over your fear. Here, we have a snake right here, we're going to bring it into the room, right? And the guy freaked out, and he said, there is no snake. You're freaking out over something that, just the idea of it, right? So can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, it goes back to what I said a little bit earlier. The mind operates in what's known as modalities, okay? And there's 5 modalities. You know them as sight, sound, touch, taste, and feeling. Those are the 5 modalities. And then these thoughts in our mind are related to the five senses, and all these modalities have what's known as submodalities. A submodality is just an aspect. A submodality is just an aspect of a modality. So, one example of sight, a submodality of that would be whether something's big or whether it's small, whether it's black and white or whether it's colored. Submodalities of auditory would be, whether something's loud or it's soft, if it has a pleasing tonality or if it has a nasally tonality, if it's loud or if it's quiet. Now, what Richard Bandler can do is he can take those images in your mind and he can instruct you how to take those modalities that you use, those submodalities, and he can take your fear of snakes and he can say, okay, what I want you to do is make an image of a snake in mind, like really big. So the person closed their eyes, goes through a white trance, is like, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to take that large image in your mind and I want you to shrink it down, okay? And now I want you to take all the color out of it. And he's taking the submodalities and he's shrinking it down.
So let's talk about some of the things that you and by the way, some of the things that you've taught me. I then turn on the TV or I go in public and I go, what the fuck? Like I see things that you've taught me. One of the things that, and you tell me if this is an NLP type of a tactic or if it's just propaganda. But Edward Bernays, for those of you that don't know, Edward Bernays was the godfather of propaganda. He wrote a book called Propaganda, and he was the inventor of public relations, literally coined the term public relations. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry built on what he taught. And he lived he started this in the 1920s. He wrote Propaganda in 1928. And one of the most fascinating things that I saw that he did that a lot of people don't talk about is ivory soap. You've heard of ivory soap, right?
Yeah.
It's a staple in American society. Everybody knows ivory soap. A lot of people use it. But back in the I think it was before World War I? No, it was World War II. Ivory soap wasn't doing very good. And so the makers of it hired Edward Bernays. And they said, how in the fuck do we get people to buy our soap? We can't do it. It's harsh. Little kids don't like it on their face. It burns their eyes. What do? Do we reformulate it? What do we do? So Edward Bernays said, what you do is back in the day, a lot of people like to whittle, carve things. So they started a soap carving, an American patriotic soap carving contest. And you would buy a bar of ivory soap and carve it and then send it in or send the picture in and your name would be in the newspaper, things like that. And from then on, all of a sudden, ivory soap was patriotic in people's minds. It's not that it was implanted in their minds that this was a patriotic thing to do to buy this soap. Can you comment on that?
I can actually comment on it. I can give you the labels of what those techniques are, and then I can give you a few popular examples. Number one, this enacts two principles of persuasion. Not necessarily NLP, but the two principles of persuasion that I can point out right there is number one, authority, and social group. This goes back to what we were talking about the thought experiments. A lot of people, started standing up, sitting down, standing up, sitting down. The reason that they were doing that is because everybody else was doing that. And then when they took out the actors who were standing up and sitting down and getting the subject, the victim, to stand up and sit down, once the actors all left, oh no, I'm thinking of something else. Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. I was kind of wondering because I didn't.
Where a bunch of actors were in a room, a normal person walked into the thing, and like when there was a beep, everybody would stand up and sit down. And then after a while, the woman started standing up and sitting down every time she heard the beep. And then eventually, all the actors left the waiting room. And then suddenly, she was totally alone. She was still doing it. And when normal people started to file in, she taught the normal people how to do what she was doing. And then suddenly, everybody was doing it. And then that woman left, and all of those other people were teaching them to stand up to the beep. And that's an example of social proof.
Okay, let me unpack that real quick. So you're saying there was an experiment where there was a controlled, experiment.
It was like a therapist's office, controlled environment.
Okay, and so there were people that knew what was going on in the experiment, and when they heard a beep, they would stand up or sit down, and just by the regular people in the waiting room or whatnot, observing what they're talking about, they began to do it too, and then they passed, after the actors were gone, they passed that on to different other people that came after them?
No, the actors left the control area. So it was like a waiting room.
Right.
And then suddenly, she was all alone and she was still doing it. When it beeped, she would stand up and sit down. And then normal people who weren't actors, who weren't part of it, she started to teach them, oh, you know what, you gotta stand up and sit down when you hear the beep. So that it's basically a herd mentality, or like sheep-like mentality. And then the other one is authority. Now, I know we've all seen Nike commercials with Air Jordans. Like, what are those shoes called again? Air what?
Jordans.
Air Jordans. Now, these shoes may or may not be a good shoe, but just because you've heard the line, I want to be like Mike, right?
Yeah.
That is a verbal anchor. And what anchors are anything that triggers a memory of something else. You remember how I was talking about modalities? Like I'm gonna hum a tune from a movie run, and in 5 seconds I want you to tell me what it is. You'll probably get it before I even stop doing it. Dun 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 dun.
Jaws.
Jaws, exactly. And that was an auditory anchor. And like I said, it's just a memory that triggers it's anything that triggers a memory. Like, I know you probably have this, everybody on the planet has this. You know how girls, like when they meet a guy, they say, oh my God, this is our song. Then every time you hear that song, you think of that person.
Right.
Every couple, has, oh, this is the song that went with that.
Or even when you're fucking and there's a song playing, you remember exactly what. It's a family show.
Little insight there. No, it's not. This ain't no family.
We know what you're talking about, but an anchor could be something visual, like the Batman logo. Like when they were doing the Justice League movies, and even like some Nike ads. They don't need to put Batman versus Superman. They don't need to put
Just put the swirl.
They don't need to put Nike, just do it. All you need is that little swoosh, and hey, oh, that's Nike, And they put these everywhere, so you're constantly reminded of them. And like in London, they had just like a little Superman logo. That's all you needed to advertise that movie. And they put it really big, really huge in a place that everyone was seeing. So every time somebody drove to work, oh, I got to go see the Justice League. Oh, I got to go buy a Nike shoe. Another famous example of this is Coca-Cola and American Idol. Now this is good. You're going to like this. On American Idol, it's funded by Coke. Okay,
I didn't
it's
know
funded
that.
by Coke.
I didn't know that.
If you look at the back of the chairs that the judges are sitting on, the chairs look like Coke bottles.
No way.
During the show,
I noticed that.
what
the
you'll
fuck
see is
outta
like
here.
every part during the show, they'll have like somebody sipping a Coke while somebody's singing they're
I've
sipping
seen
a
that
Coke.
with the Coke.
And then on even one occasion, Simon Cowell, the famous American Idol guy, goes, "You know how good that performance was?" The guy's like, "How good was that performance?" And he's like, "Just about as good as this Coke."
Oh my god. That's why I don't watch that shit.
And
Go ahead.
it gets really sneaky. And you'll notice, like, in some ads, and particularly even some of Richard Bandler's book, they will hide messages in, like, complex ways.
I've seen.
Like, an example of that is, like, they'll show, like, a really well-lit shot of a glass with bourbon in it, and, they'll have, like, the bourbon glass right over here, but hidden, just barely, will be the words sex, and nobody notices it because it's so well hidden in the image, but your subconscious picks up on that and says, "Wow, if I drink half a soda vodka, I'm going to get laid tonight." Wow.
That's what I was gonna say. So go into, and you're already going into it, but this is, I love this stuff. This is great. So go into the power of the subconscious mind, like how, one frame in a movie, one image going by in a car when you're driving by, and you see Jack in the Box, and you go, "Fuck, I'm hungry." Like, how powerful is the subconscious mind?
Well, it's actually very powerful, and the thing about it is the mind, the unconscious mind can process 1/30th of a second on an image. And
A 30, so like one frame, like one frame of video. A 30.
One frame of video, yeah. And like if you put in just like little one frames of something, like a word, like "buy Coke now," or "do this," or "buy Nike shoes," you can actually detect it with the naked eye. But your unconscious mind will process that as an instruction. And one example, and this is one of my favorite examples, one of the reasons I like Richard Bandler is he has RB, those are my initials. And then we've got Darren Brown over here. Now, Darren Brown is a famous mentalist from the UK, and he did this mentalism trick. And basically what he did is he took this famous, I believe it was Martin Freeman from Sherlock. He took Martin Freeman in this room, and he goes, "In this envelope, I've written a prediction, all right? Now what I want you to do is I want to paint an image in your mind by creating this image. Now, what you want could be something like a BM or an Xbox or, any of that. And then like hidden around the room were several circular shaped objects with like chains on them. And at the end of the thing, he goes, "Okay, now what were you thinking?" And then he goes, "I don't know, I was thinking of a BMX bike." And then Darren Brown opens the envelope and he goes, "And that was exactly my prediction. Pick a BMX bike." Now, the hidden subconscious things in here are, one of the things that I could get into, but I could take hours from that, is phonological ambiguity. Now, pay attention to this sentence. I am going to create an image in your mind by creating something that you're not aware of. Now, you notice those two words, "by creating." It sounds, if you crunch them together, it sounds like bike, B-I-K-E, space C-R-E-A-T-I-N-G. So that little phonological ambiguity is what it's called.
Okay.
A lot of these are slipped in everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and everywhere, Ron, everywhere. I hear them in my church's sermons, and I hear them in advertising, I hear them everywhere. And this is an actual term. And, a lot of people talk about taking this in a new direction, but what a lot of people don't know is new direction is also a phonological ambiguity, because it can be new direction, or it could be NUDE space ERECTION.
New direction.
And, you know, people in the NLP seduction community will talk in these terms, and it will go into subconscious. Like, for example, Ron, when I say you're unconscious, what am I saying? Am I saying you're unconscious, like Y-O-U-R, like you're unconscious? Or am I saying you are unconscious?
I thought you were saying you're
somebody in a trance.
Gotcha.
Pretty crazy, right? And this is in tons of advertisements. This is in tons of propaganda. And, you know, there's 4 types of phonological ambiguity, but I won't get into that because I could go on for years about that. So, yeah, there are tons of images and words and embedded commands hidden in virtually, basically anything on TV. Henry.
Gotcha. So it would be really hard to see, because you and I have seen videos like this on YouTube where somebody will take a 2-minute clip of Fox News talking about the 9/11 attacks or something, and they turn it into a 30-minute video because they stop it every other second and explain what they think is going on. So that being said, it would be very hard to just sit and pick every little single thing apart. What is a better thing is for people to learn, read these books you're talking about, learn these tactics, and then suddenly they will appear in society, and you can educate yourself. So real quick, talk about, you know, as I said, there's some of these videos on YouTube where people think they're witnessing NLP, but they either don't know that it's not NLP, or they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't know what the terms are. They don't know what the classifications are.
Well, basically, NLP has such a broad array of applications, as much as psychology does. You know, you can take anything and you can figure out the psychology of it. But NLP has a certain set of tools that you can even go deeper into things, and you can even go more in depth. Like one example I'm talking about is the meta model. Now, the meta model is it's a series of questions in no particular order. You could ask one, or you could ask, you know, all 6 or 7. But, you know, for example, when somebody says, when did you stop beating your wife? Now, in NLP, there are assumptions in there, and we call those assumptions presuppositions. So, and the presuppositions here is A, you had a wife, B, you beat her, and C, at some point you stopped. Now, with the meta model, you can take these presuppositions and you can take these arguments apart just by asking questions. Like, one is, how do you know I beat my wife? Maybe I don't beat my wife. Or, you know, if somebody tells you you can't do something, you would ask them, well, what would happen if I did? What would happen if I did? You know? And then, you know, if somebody says, oh, our way is a lot better. Better than what? Compared to what? Or if somebody says, you know, most scientists think that global warming is going to destroy our planet in 30 years. You could ask the question, according to who? Which scientists specifically? You know, these questions, what would happen if I did? How do you know? According to who? Compared to what? Those are all questions from the meta model. And you could go through an average news program, and you could, if you applied these techniques, you could pick people's assumptions apart. And if newscasters study the meta model, they could disassemble a lot of these arguments, and they could get a lot more clarity. Like, one of the things that a lot of people use is, and I just did it there, is they talk about a loss performative. Now, what a loss performative is when you don't talk about the person speaking directly. Like, if you want to convince somebody of something, you could add in sentences like, most people think that crime is bad. Most people think that focus factor is the best pill out there. You know, most scientists say acetyl-L-carnitine is really good for you. Or, one reviewer said Ollie G in the House is the best movie ever. Now, the thing is that the way you would disassemble those arguments is you would go like, who specifically? According to who? Like, which reviewer thinks Ollie G in the House is a really good movie? Which scientists specifically say that focus factor is a good tip? You know? So the meta model is basically, it takes information and it clarifies it so that you can be able to understand it, and in some cases dismantle arguments before they get to you.
Copy that. So, Randy Brown.
So Randy, I think we're coming to that time where we need to give our final thoughts here. Ron, would you like to start off kind of with your final thoughts and your takeaways from this?
Well, no, that's what I was going to ask him. Go ahead and just give us a final summation of. I think you've given some really good information here, and like I said, like you said, it's a very vast subject. This is going to be a series where we have this sit down and talk. You're in Florida, that's why we're doing this via Skype. If you're ever in town, you can come by and do the show live. But what is your final summation? Like, I know you've studied this, as I said, for about a decade. What do you think that people can get? Number one, get out of NLP, benefit from NLP, and what should people look out for so that they are not manipulated?
Well, basically, I would say I would use an NLP technique, which is metaphor, and I would say that NLP has tons of ways for you to overcome your fears, phobias, addictions, helps you live a happier life, helps you not be depressed. But as far as the dark NLP goes, people using them for brainwashing, to manipulation, I would compare it to a Severus Snape in the Harry Potter movies. In the Harry Potter movie, Severus Snape, he was the defense against the dark arts teacher. And one of the prime reasons that I think you or Robbie or anybody should learn NLP is because these techniques are being used on you every day, and you don't know about them. And, the conscious and subconscious mind cannot defend itself against something that it cannot perceive. So one reason why I would learn NLP, even if you don't want to apply any of the techniques, is so that you can know which techniques are being used on you. So that's one reason to use NLP. But like I said, there's also tons of good applications like depression, live a happier life. Anything you want to do, there are possible applications for it. But like the duality of technology, for every bit of good that technology brings into the world, it brings an equal bad. So you just gotta take the bad and don't worry about the good. No. Take the good.
Was that NLP? Are you using NLP on me? All right, man. Well, this was an awesome discussion. Go ahead and plug your YouTube channels again, so that people can see some more of your videos.
Yeah, we will have the YouTube links down below, so you can go ahead and check out Randy's stuff as well. So go ahead, Randy.
Go ahead, shout it out.
Okay, well, my two YouTube channels are Cameo Man and Vlogging with Mr. Brown. And then, if I can, I'd also like to plug my books,
yes.
Which I used NLP to write.
Of course.
I have 2 books on Kindle Amazon that cost less than a cup of coffee. One is called Little Memory Books, 7 Little Tricks That Make a Big Difference. And the other one is Quantify and Achieve Your Goals. And in that book, I tell you how I lost 20 pounds using NLP. And I'll also tell you, how I wrote the book using various NLP techniques.
Awesome, man.
All right, Randy, it was good to have another discussion with you. Like I said, you're my friend, and I always wanted to be able to pass your knowledge on to others, and the Be Advised channel is letting us do that.
Yeah, Randy, thank you very much for giving us your time and your insight. From Robbie and from Ron and Randy, be advised.
Be advised, this is a free speech zone.